Welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most dramatic and emotionally charged stories to ever come out of the finance universe. This is not just a tale of love, but of culture, family, betrayal, and the painful price of choosing between tradition and independence. At the center of it all are Jenny Slatten, an American woman who dared to follow her heart across the world, and Sumit Singh, an Indian man torn between his love for Jenny and the unshakable expectations of his family. Jenny Slatten and her husband, Sumit Singh, had been trapped in family conflict for a long time. Sumit's parents never fully accepted Jenny. They always wanted Sumit to marry a younger Indian woman, start a proper family, have children, and continue the bloodline. After repeatedly hearing this from Sumit's parents, Jenny Slatten became emotionally broken. Jenny wants an independent life. Sumit wants to protect family tradition. Jenny says, "I don't want to live under anyone's control." But Sumit says, "This is our culture. We must take care of our parents." Because of this clash and the constant family drama, they decided to separate. And their year relationship ended due to family pressure. On October, their divorce was finalized in court. And after that, Sumit Singh, hoping to build a new life and considering his parents' wishes, married an Indian woman. But the story doesn't end there. Jenny Slatten then filed a case against Sumit Singh in court. She claimed that Sumit Singh had borrowed $1 from her and never paid it back. Based on that claim, the court launched an investigation, and Jenny Slatten's allegation was proven to be true. As a result, the court ordered Sumit Singh to pay a $1 penalty. This isn't just reality TV anymore. This is real life, real heartbreak, real consequences. So grab your seat, because this story is about to take you on a roller coaster of emotions, love, betrayal, tradition, and justice. Let's begin. Every great story starts with a spark. And for Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh, that spark came in the most unexpected way. Jenny, a woman from Palm Springs, California, had lived a fairly ordinary life. She was divorced. Her children were grown, and she was searching for companionship in her later years. Like many, she turned to the internet, where borders blur and love stories are born in the most unlikely places. That's where she met Sumit Singh. Sumit was younger, charming, and full of energy. He lived in India, a world away from Jenny's quiet American life. At first, their connection seemed impossible. The age gap was significant. The cultural differences were vast, and the distance was overwhelming. But love doesn't always follow logic. Their online conversations grew deeper. Jenny found in Sumit a sense of excitement and warmth she hadn't felt in years. Sumit, in turn, was drawn to Jenny's kindness, her openness, and her willingness to embrace him for who he was. When Jenny decided to travel to India to meet Sumit, it wasn't just a vacation. It was a leap of faith. She left behind the comfort of her familiar world to step into a culture she barely understood, all for the chance at love. The first meeting was magical. Cameras captured the nervous smiles, the hugs, the tears of joy. For Jenny, it felt like destiny. For Sumit, it was the beginning of a dream he never thought possible. But even in those early days, shadows loomed. Jenny was aware of the whispers, the doubts from friends and family back home. He's too young. He just wants a visa. This will never work. And in India, the whispers were louder. Sumit's parents had no idea about Jenny, and when they eventually found out, their reaction was explosive. To them, Jenny wasn't just the wrong woman. She was a symbol of everything they feared. A foreigner, an older woman, someone who could never give them grandchildren. Still, Jenny and Sumit pressed forward. They believed their love was strong, enough to overcome the odds. They laughed together, cooked together, and dreamed of a future where they could live freely without judgment. Love may be blind, but culture has a way of opening eyes, sometimes painfully. 4. Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh. The first real test of their relationship wasn't distance or age, but the invisible wall of tradition that stood between them and Sumit's family. In India, family is not just important. It is everything. Parents are not simply respected. They are obeyed. Their wishes carry the weight of destiny. And for many sons, the idea of defying them is unthinkable. Sumit knew this truth all too well. When his parents discovered Jenny, their reaction was nothing short of explosive. To them, she was not just an unsuitable partner. She was a threat to the very fabric of their family's honor. Jenny was older, foreign, and unable to give them the grandchildren they longed for. In their eyes, she represented the end of their bloodline. The conversations were brutal. Sumit's parents told him again and again that his duty was to marry a young Indian woman, someone who could carry forward the family name and traditions. They reminded him of the sacrifices they had made raising him, the expectations of the community, and the shame they would endure if he chose. For Jenny, these confrontations were devastating. She had left behind her entire life in America to be with Sumit, only to find herself treated as an outsider in his home. She wasn't just unwelcome. She was invisible, dismissed, as if her love didn't matter. But Jenny wasn't one to back down easily. She tried to win them over with kindness, patience, and respect. She learned bits of Hindi, embraced Indian customs, and did her best to show that her love for Sumit was genuine. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, the wall never came down. The tension began to seep into their daily lives. Family dinners turned into battlegrounds. Every phone call from Sumit's parents carried a new demand, a new reminder that Jenny would never be enough. And slowly, the joy that once defined their relationship began to fade under the weight of constant disapproval. Sumit was caught in the middle. On one side was Jenny, the woman he loved, who wanted nothing more than to live freely with him. On the other side were his parents, whose approval he had craved his entire life. The pressure was suffocating. Jenny, meanwhile, began to feel the cracks in her dream. She had imagined a life of love and adventure in India, but instead, she found herself in a war she never signed up for. The whispers of doubt grew louder. Was she ruining Sumit's life? Was she selfish for holding on? The cameras captured it all. The tears, the arguments, the moments of silence where love seemed to be slipping through their fingers. What began as a fairy tale was quickly becoming a cautionary tale about the collision of love and tradition. And yet, despite the storm, Jenny and Sumit held on. They believed, perhaps naively, that love could conquer all. But now I will tell you the struggle for acceptance was only just beginning, and the cost of defiance would be higher than either of them ever imagined. For Jenny Slatten, love was supposed to be her safe haven. She had crossed oceans, left behind her family, and embraced a new culture for the man she loved. But instead of finding peace, she found herself in a constant battle, not with Sumit, but with the world around him. The resistance from Sumit's parents was relentless. Every time Jenny thought she had made progress, another wall went up. She tried everything, learning Indian customs, cooking traditional meals, even dressing in local attire to show respect. But no, matter how much she adapted, she was never truly accepted. The age gap was the weapon Sumit's parents wielded most often. They reminded him that Jenny was old enough to be his mother, that she could never give them grandchildren, that she would never fit into the role of a traditional Indian wife. For them, Jenny wasn't just the wrong choice. She was a humiliation. Jenny, however, refused to give up. She believed that love was enough, that if she and Sumit stood strong together, eventually his parents would see the truth. She poured her heart into proving her worth, not just to Sumit, but to his entire family. Yet the more she tried, the more invisible she felt. The community around them added fuel to the fire. Neighbors whispered, relatives judged, and every social gathering became a reminder that Jenny was an outsider. For Sumit, the pressure was unbearable. He loved Jenny deeply, but he also loved his parents. He wanted both worlds to coexist, but the reality was that they were tearing him apart. The cameras captured moments of raw vulnerability. Jenny crying alone in her room, questioning whether she had made a mistake. Sumit sitting in silence, torn between his heart and his heritage. Their love story, once filled with laughter and hope, was now overshadowed by constant tension. And yet, through it all, Jenny held on. She told herself that every great love story faced obstacles, that this was just another test of their bond. She believed that if she endured the pain long enough, acceptance would come. But deep down, cracks were forming. Jenny began to feel the weight of sacrifice. She had given up her life in America, her independence, her comfort, all for a love that seemed to demand more from her every day. And Sumit, though devoted, began to show signs of exhaustion. The endless tug of war between his parents and Jenny was draining him, leaving him caught in a cycle of guilt and obligation. The struggle for acceptance wasn't just about family approval anymore. It was about identity, about belonging, about whether love could survive when the world refused to recognize it. By this point, Jenny and Sumit weren't just fighting for their relationship. They were fighting for their very right to exist as a couple. And as the pressure mounted, the question became clear. How long could they keep fighting before something finally broke? For Jenny Slatten, love was never meant to feel like a cage. She had left behind her life in America with the dream of freedom. Freedom to love, openly, to live authentically, and to finally find happiness after years of loneliness. But in India, she discovered that her new life came with invisible chains. Every day, she felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her. Sumit's parents demanded obedience. The community whispered about her age. Even Sumit, the man she had crossed oceans for, seemed torn between protecting her and protecting his family's honor. Jenny began to feel suffocated. She had always been a strong-willed woman, someone who valued her independence. Back in California, she had lived life on her own terms. But here, in a culture where family decisions often outweighed personal desires, she felt powerless. The breaking point came during one of the many heated arguments with Sumit's parents. Jenny, exhausted from years of trying to prove herself, finally snapped. With tears in her eyes, she told them, "I don't want to live under anyone's control. I came here for love, not to be treated like a prisoner." Those words echoed like thunder. For Jenny, it was a declaration of war, not against Sumit, but against the system that refused to see her as worthy. She wanted to reclaim her voice, her dignity, and her right to live freely. But independence came at a cost. Her defiance only deepened the rift with Sumit's family, they saw her refusal to conform as arrogance, as disrespect. To them, Jenny wasn't just rejecting tradition. She was rejecting them. Sumit, caught in the middle, tried to calm the storm. He begged Jenny to be patient, to understand that change in India didn't happen overnight. But Jenny had already sacrificed so much. She had given up her home, her comfort, her identity. And still, she was treated as an outsider. The more she fought for independence, the more isolated she became. Friends back home urged her to return, to stop wasting her life on a man whose family would never accept her. But Jenny wasn't ready to give up. She loved Sumit deeply, and she believed that if she stood her ground, he would eventually choose her fully. Her fight for independence wasn't just about love anymore. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she deserved respect, that her age, her nationality, her differences didn't make her less of a partner. The cameras captured her transformation. No longer the quiet, hopeful woman who had arrived in India. With stars in her eyes, Jenny became a fighter. She spoke with conviction. She demanded fairness, and she refused to be silenced. But independence is a battles with family, with culture, and with each other. By the time they reached the Koros, Jenny and Sumit were no longer the storied couple who had once believed love could conquer all. They were weary soldiers, scarred by endless conflict. The final straw had been the ultimatum from Sumit's parents. Choose us or lose us. For Sumit, the pressure was unbearable. He had tried to balance both worlds, but the weight of tradition proved too heavy. Jenny, meanwhile, had grown tired of waiting for a miracle that never came. She wanted freedom, respect, and a life where she wasn't constantly fighting for her place. On October, the gavel came down. Their divorce was finalized. The courtroom was silent, but the silence carried the weight of heartbreak. Jenny sat with tears in her eyes, her face a mixture of grief and relief. She had fought so hard for this love, but in the end, she had to let it go. Sumit, on the other hand, looked broken, torn between the woman he loved and the family he could never abandon. For fans of Fiancé, the news was shocking. Viewers had watched their journey unfold for years, rooting for them through every obstacle. To see it end in divorce felt like the end of an era. Social media exploded with reactions. Some sympathized with Jenny, praising her strength, while others defended Sumit, arguing that he had no choice but to honor his parents. But behind the headlines and the gossip, the reality was far more painful. Jenny returned to a life of solitude, questioning whether her sacrifices had been worth it. She had given up everything, her home, her comfort, her independence, only to end up alone. Sumit, meanwhile, faced the bittersweet reality of fulfilling his parents' wishes, but losing the woman who had once been his entire world. The divorce wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the collapse of a dream. The dream that love could bridge cultures, erase age gaps, and silence the voices of tradition. For Jenny and Sumit, that dream had been their guiding light. Now, it was gone. And yet, even in the ashes of their marriage, the story was far from over. Because while Sumit moved forward with a new marriage, one that aligned with his parents' expectations, Jenny was not ready to fade quietly into the background. She carried with her not only heartbreak, but also a sense of betrayal that would soon ignite a new battle. The divorce may have ended their love story, but it was only the beginning of a much larger war, one that would play out in courtrooms and headlines and in the hearts of fans around the world. Now, I will tell you how Sumit's attempt to rebuild his life with a new wife collided with the lingering shadow of his past, and how Jenny's heartbreak transformed into determination for justice. For Sumit Singh, the divorce from Jenny Slatten was supposed to bring clarity. The years of conflict, the endless tug-of-war between love and family had finally reached their conclusion. On paper, he was free. Free from the arguments, free from the judgment, free from the impossible balancing act that had defined his life. But freedom, as Sumit soon discovered, came with its own price. Almost immediately after the divorce, his parents began to push him toward what they had always wanted, a proper marriage. They introduced him to a younger Indian woman, someone who fit neatly into the mold of tradition, youthful from a respected family, and capable of giving them the grandchildren they longed for. For Sumit, the decision was less about romance and more about duty. He had spent years defying his parents, and the cost had been unbearable. Now, with Jenny gone, he felt the weight of obligation heavier than ever. To refuse again would mean permanent arrangement. To accept meant finally earning back his parents' approval. And so Sumit agreed. The wedding was everything his parents had dreamed of. Colorful, traditional, filled with music, laughter, and blessings. To the outside world, it looked like a happy ending. Sumit was finally fulfilling his role as a beautiful son, and his parents beamed with pride. The community, once critical of his relationship with Jenny, now embraced him again. But behind the smiles and rituals, Sumit's heart was conflicted. He had loved Jenny deeply, and though their relationship had ended, the memories lingered. Every ritual, every vow he made to his new wife carried the shadow of the woman he had once promised forever to. The cameras didn't capture this wedding. It wasn't part of the Day Fiancé storyline, but whispers spread quickly. Fans who had followed his journey with Jenny were stunned. Social media lit up with debates. Had Sumit betrayed Jenny, or was he simply doing what he had to do? Was this marriage a fresh start, or just another set of chains binding him to tradition? Jenny, watching from afar, was devastated, though she had agreed to the divorce. Seeing Sumit move on so quickly, and in the exact way his parents had always demanded, felt like a betrayal. To her, it was proof that all her sacrifices had been in vain. She had fought for years to be accepted, only to be replaced by someone who fit the mold. She never could. For Sumit, the marriage brought temporary peace. His parents were satisfied. The community approved. And for the first time in years, he wasn't caught in the middle of a war. But peace built on compromise is fragile. Deep inside, he knew he had chosen tradition over love, duty over freedom. And that choice would haunt him, because while Sumit was trying to build a new life, Jenny was preparing for a battle of her own. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was angry. Angry at the years she had given, angry at the sacrifices she had made, and most of all, angry at the betrayal she felt when Sumit walked away without looking back. And soon, that anger would take shape in the form of a lawsuit, one that would drag their story back into the spotlight and force the world to confront the messy truth about love, money, and betrayal. Now, I will tell you how Jenny's heartbreak transformed into determination, and how her fight for justice would ignite a courtroom battle. That shocked everyone. For Jenny Slatten, the divorce was supposed to be the end of her suffering. After years of fighting for acceptance, after sacrificing her comfort, her independence, and her dignity, she thought that walking away would finally bring peace. But peace never came. Instead, what followed was heartbreak, a deep knowing pain that seemed to shadow her every step. She had given 4 years of her life to Sumit Singh, believing in a love that could withstand anything. And yet, in the end, she was left with nothing but memories and regret. Jenny returned to her quiet routines, but the silence was unbearable. Every corner of her home reminded her of the sacrifices she had made. Every news headline about Sumit's new marriage felt like salt in an open wound. She had fought so hard to be seen, only to be replaced by someone who fit the mold she never could. But Jenny was not the kind of woman who stayed broken for long. Beneath the grief, a fire began to burn. She replayed the years in her mind, the promises Sumit had made, the assurances that they would build a life together, the countless times she had supported him financially and emotionally. And then one memory stood out above the rest, the money. Jenny remembered the dollar she had given Sumit over the course of their relationship. At the time, it hadn't felt like a loan. It had felt like love, an investment in their future together. But now, with the relationship over and Sumit moving on, with a new wife, Jenny realized the truth. She had been left with nothing, and he had walked away with everything. The heartbreak transformed into determination. Jenny decided she would not be silent. She would not be forgotten, and she would not allow herself to be taken advantage of. If love had failed her, then justice would be her weapon. She contacted a lawyer, gathering every piece of evidence she could find. Bank transfers, messages, and records of the money she had given Sumit. What had once been private moments of trust now became ammunition. In a legal battle, Jenny was no longer just the heartbroken ex-wife. She was a woman on a mission. Filing the case was not easy. It meant reopening wounds, reliving the pain, and dragging her personal life back into the public eye. But Jenny was ready. She had spent too long being dismissed, too long being treated as if her sacrifices didn't matter. This time, she would make sure.